People often say blood is thicker than water, and family would never turn their back on you. But they have never seen a son-in-law stand right in the living room, point at his father-in-law and say, "Want to see the kids? Pay $2,000 for each weekend." In that moment, I did not get angry. I only smiled, because I knew some lessons cannot be taught with words, but must be taught with the law. And some debts are not repaid with money, but with justice. If you have ever had love turned into a tool by your own family, ever been demeaned simply because you are no longer useful, stay. This story will show you how a father who seemed defeated stood up with the strongest weapons, silence and evidence. Before I tell everything, hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and comment the name of the city where you are watching from. Because when you finish listening, you will understand silence is not weakness. It is the engine of justice. People often say old age makes people soft, but they forget one thing. When an old father is silent, it is not because he is afraid, but because he is counting every word he says so that, when needed, a single sentence is enough to make others bow their heads. That morning I was sitting on the porch, watching Lake Travis reflect the morning sun when my phone rang. A message came from Travis, my son-in-law. "Want to see the kids? $2,000 for the weekend. What do you think, Dad?" I read that message 3 times, my fingers trembling slightly, but not from anger, from surprise. Perhaps no one had ever put a price on family affection so plainly. I set the phone down on the table, looked at the silver-framed photo on the shelf, Mason and Lily, my 2 grandchildren, smiling beside the little wooden boat I built last year. Every summer they go out with me on the lake, fish, and have lunch on the dock. That day, Mason said, "Grandpa, let's go again next year, okay?" And I nodded, not knowing that simple promise would become a luxury. I made coffee and sat quietly for a long time until the steam from the cup cooled. Then I spoke softly, as if to myself, "All right, Travis, if you want to play with money, we will calculate, according to the law." That afternoon I drove to Oak Ridge, the lakeside villa neighborhood where my daughter Claire lives with Travis and the 2 kids. The familiar road ran along the slope, with pine trees on both sides. I had poured every sack of cement into that house's foundation, helped Travis roof it, and believed I was building a home for my daughter. When I stopped the car at the gate, Mason and Lily were playing in the yard. They ran to me as soon as they saw me, smiling brightly. "Grandpa, you're here." Just hearing their voices melted all my annoyance, but then another voice sounded, cold, dry, calculating. Travis came out from the porch wearing a white shirt, holding a glass of red wine. "Well, Dad, what a surprise," he said with a thin smile. "But the kids are busy. This weekend is full." I looked at him calmly. "They just need a few hours. I want to take them to the lake like every year." Travis shrugged. "You know, my time is valuable. 2,000, cash. Otherwise, forget it." Those words fell into the quiet yard like a stone thrown into the lake. Claire stood behind the glass door, her face half hidden. I saw her bowing her head, avoiding my eyes. I swallowed, asked, "Are you joking?" Travis shook his head and took a sip of wine. "No, Dad. If you want to see the kids, you must respect the house rules. I am the one who decides." I bent down and smoothed Mason and Lily's hair. "Go inside, you 2. Listen to your parents." Mason looked up. "Aren't you coming fishing with me, Grandpa?" I smiled, trying to keep my voice light. "Another time, Mason. Another time." They ran inside, not understanding. I stood there watching the door close, hearing the lock click. A small sound, but heavier than any insult. On the way back, I did not turn on the radio. Only the engine noise and a thought gnawing at me. A man may lose everything, job, money, friends. But if he loses the right to hold his grandchildren, he loses his reason to live. I stopped by the lakeside where I usually fish with them. The water was flat and reflected a pale gray sky. I remembered the day Claire called me 3 years ago, sobbing about losing the house. I had withdrawn my entire savings from 40 years as an engineer to rescue them. $128,000. No receipt, no demand to be repaid, only my signature on the deed of trust that the young lawyer Julia Denton advised me to keep, just in case. Today that paper sat in the old safe, in the wooden box engraved with my name. Peter Langford, 1992. I knew if I opened it, I would find the truth about that house. It was still in my name. The late afternoon light, copper and heavy, covered the lake. I picked up a pebble and tossed it lightly. It made ripples, layer upon layer, like choices in life. Every decision leaves a wake. I have lived by one principle. Every bridge I build must stand, and if someone knocks one down, I will be the one to rebuild it. I returned home when the city lights were on. In the garage, I opened the old wooden box. The papers were there, neat, with the raised seal of the Travis County office. I ran my fingers over the line holder, Peter Langford. Documents do not lie. I sat at the desk, opened the old notebook, turned to a fresh page and wrote carefully, line by line, Travis Beckett, account. 2020, substitute mortgage payment, $128,000. 2021, no principal repayment, no interest, no thanks. 2022, demanded an additional $10,000 investment, refused. 2023, obstructed. Meetings with grandchildren, demanded $2,000 per weekend. I looked at those numbers. Each line was a cut, not on the skin, but on trust. Then I opened the phone and scrolled to J. Julia Denton, attorney at law. I paused, then did not call. Not because I hesitated. I just wanted to be sure that when I called, I would not speak from emotion, but from reason. I poured more coffee, sat still, listening to the insects outside. In the dark, Lake Travis reflected the lights from my porch, like a calm mirror. I looked at it and knew, the waves will rise. I am just not the one stirring them yet. Before going to bed, I took a blank sheet, folded it into thirds, and put it in an envelope. I had not written anything, only lightly marked one line with a pen. Return to the one who built it. I sealed the envelope and placed it on the table, looking at it one last time. Tomorrow morning I will bring this envelope to Oak Ridge, not to pay for his time, but to start counting the debt. 3 weeks after Julia's last message, I heard the familiar engine stop at my gate. Travis's BMW had a distinct sound, a dry roar that lingered at the end, as if it wanted to remind the neighbors it was worth more than anything else on this street. I set my coffee cup down, folded my newspaper, and waited. He didn't knock. The door opened as if the house belonged to him. "Dear father-in-law," Travis said with a grin, stepping inside with the confidence of a man about to pitch a dream. "Lucky I caught you home." He sat on the leather chair across from me, leaning forward slightly, his palm open as though holding a grand secret. "I have an incredible investment opportunity in West Austin, a luxury condo project. I just need $10,000 more to get in as a founding shareholder." I said nothing, just folded the paper again carefully and placed it on the table. "An opportunity that good, huh?" "It's real," he said, his tone smooth, rehearsed. "This time's different, Dad. I have learned from past mistakes." I looked straight into his eyes. "And what about the previous ones? 3,000 for the consulting deal, 4,000 for the crypto exchange, 5,000 for the marketing project. That's 12,000 total, plus the 6,000 you paid and then stopped. How much do you owe me, Travis?" His body stiffened. The smile slowly vanished, leaving only a cold stare. "Those were investments, not debts. You don't have any documents proving otherwise." I turned my coffee cup slightly, my voice calm. "Deed of trust, notarized, contains repayment clauses, everything." The air thickened. Travis scoffed. "You're really turning family matters into a lawsuit? You forget who saved this house." I looked at him, speaking slowly. "I haven't forgotten. It's because I remember that I know I'm being used. He shot to his feet, pacing like a caged animal. What do you even know about investing, about markets, about this era? You sit here drinking coffee, reading newspapers, pretending you understand life. You don't know anything. I watched him walk back and forth and said softly, maybe not. But I understand structural principles. If the foundation is broken, any house will fall. He stopped, stepped closer, and bent down so our eyes met. I'm building a future for Claire and the kids. You're the one tearing it down. If you won't help, don't blame me for protecting my family. I held his gaze steadily. By charging me money to see my grandchildren? His voice turned colder. I'm just setting boundaries. You're the one crossing them. I set my cup down and wiped the rim with a napkin. Boundaries, huh? I saved this house when it was 14 days from foreclosure. The only boundary I set was trust, and you've crossed it. Travis pressed his lips, pulled out his phone, typed something, and slipped it back into his pocket. Fine, you'll see. Claire's on my side. You're clinging to what's no longer yours. He walked to the door and paused before leaving. Oh, and if you don't want trouble, stay away from Oak Ridge. Claire and the kids need peace. I didn't answer. Only the sound of the door closing, soft but final, like the period at the end of a lie. I sat there for a while, listening to the engine fade away. My hand trembled slightly, not from fear, but from realizing everything had reached its breaking point. That afternoon, I opened the safe, took out the deed of trust file in my notebook, and drove to see Julia Denton. She read through each page, then looked up. They've violated the installment clause for more than 3 months. You're entitled to send a notice of default. I nodded. I know, but I want to follow every step correctly. Julia smiled faintly and nodded. Careful like an engineer. I like that. I'll prepare the paperwork. I left as dusk settled. Through the car window, Austin shimmered in gold light. I stopped at the Hillcrest Bridge railing. The water below was glass still, mirroring the pale violet sky. I remembered Mason once asked, Grandpa, how do you know when to fish and when to wait? I told him, when the water's calm enough, you'll see the fish. Now I understand. Not only fish appear in stillness, but truth too. I returned home, opened my notebook, and wrote another line. March 12th. Travis requested an additional $10,000. Refused. Hostile attitude. Preparing legal documentation. Then I closed the notebook, turned off the light, and whispered into the dark, the bridge has cracked. Time to replace the beam. 2 weeks passed in silence. No calls, no messages from Claire. The Oak Ridge house had vanished from my map, leaving only a space each time I opened the fridge and saw Lily's old drawing. Every morning I still made coffee and opened the newspaper, but my eyes couldn't read a single word. When a man loses contact with the ones he loves, he starts to hear every ticking clock inside his house. On Saturday afternoon, I tried calling Claire. The phone rang 3 times, then cut off. I called again. The second time, I only heard the automated voice. The third, the line was busy. I stared at the phone, knowing it wasn't a bad reception. It was a choice. The next day, I drove to Oak Ridge. The iron gate was closed. It used to always be open, and Mason would run out to greet me. Now there was a new camera mounted on the right pillar, its red light glowing. I pressed the buzzer. After a moment, Travis's voice came through the intercom, pretending friendliness but tight underneath. Peter, what do you need? I spoke slowly. I want to see Claire and the kids. Claire's busy. Mason and Lily have tutoring. I'll let you know when they're free. I stayed where I was, looking through the gap in the gate. Mason was riding his bike around the yard, and Lily sat coloring under the porch. I said softly, Just 5 minutes, Travis. I brought them some picture books. No, Peter, he said, his voice colder now. Don't make this hard. This is my house. I gripped the gate tighter. I paid off the debt on this house. Don't forget that. I remember, he replied with a faint laugh. And you should remember, gratitude doesn't equal ownership. I saw Claire behind the window. Her eyes met mine for only a second before she looked away. She turned and drew the curtains. The gate shut with the sound of an electric lock, short, final. I stood there a few more minutes before returning to the car. As I started the engine, I saw Mason run to the window and press his hand to the glass. I raised my hand. He raised his back. That moment tightened my chest. A child who doesn't yet know someone is being forbidden to love them. That evening, I sat at my desk and opened my notebook. I added a line. March 24th. Denied visitation with grandchildren. Claire silent. Oak Ridge gate fitted with a camera. I stopped, staring at the words. Claire silent. That line was short, but heavier than any unpaid debt. I stood and walked out to the porch. The Texas spring sky was a deep blue, the wind carrying the scent of pine and damp soil. I thought of the bridges I had designed. All of them held because of their joints. Once a connection breaks, the whole structure collapses, no matter how strong the material. Families are the same. One night, I dreamed of Mason standing in the middle of a bridge, calling to me while Travis stood at the far end holding a red flag, forbidding me to cross. I woke drenched in cold sweat. The next morning, I decided to do what I'd always avoided. I printed every payment record from the bank, each transfer, each interest payment I'd covered, and the stamped receipt marked paid in full from the Travis County office. I clipped them together and placed them beside the debt ledger. Looking at those papers, I could see every crack widening. I remembered what Julia once said. Good people often think silence is mercy, but to cunning men, silence is an invitation. That night, as I turned on the desk lamp, I heard the wind whistle through the door frame. I set my pen down and wrote one last line at the bottom of the page. March 25th. The cord has snapped. Then I closed the notebook, finished the cold coffee, and whispered, if my daughter can't speak, then I'll let the law do it for her. On Monday morning, I went to Julia Denton's office. The room was still as small as the first time I came, but her desk was so neatly arranged that no one would dare place anything out of line. Julia looked up when I entered and smiled faintly, the smile of someone who already knew exactly what was coming. I take it you've made your decision, she said. I nodded. I want to do this properly. By the book, no emotions, no noise. Julia gestured for me to sit and pulled out a thin file. I prepared the draft for the notice of default and intent to foreclose. First, we confirm your lien is still active. Then we send a formal notice to the borrower. She opened her computer and searched the Travis County database. I saw my name appear. Lien holder, Peter Langford. Julia nodded. Everything's intact. They haven't made a single payment since March of 2023. Under Texas law, you're entitled to issue a formal notice, giving them 30 days to cure the default. If they don't, you can proceed with foreclosure. I stayed quiet for a moment before asking, if I do this, what happens to Claire? Julia's tone softened. If you don't, she'll remain in a house with unclear ownership, controlled by someone exploiting her. Sometimes you have to break what's wrong to preserve what's right. I nodded, smiling slightly. That sounds more like something an engineer would say than a lawyer. She replied, maybe I learned it from you. Julia printed the notice and placed a pen on the desk. Would you like to sign today? I picked up the pen and looked at the bold heading. Notice of default. 2847 Oak Ridge Drive, Austin, TX. Beneath it was my name. I signed slowly, each stroke deliberate. When the ink dried, I knew I had started a machine that no one could stop. Julia folded the documents into a thick white envelope, sealing it with a red stamp. It'll be delivered in person, signature required. I'll send you a copy. I held the envelope. It felt heavier than expected, not from paper, but from meaning. On the way home, I stopped in the garage and opened the old wooden box. Everything was still there. The contract, receipts, notarized copies. I added a new page. the copy of the notice Julia had printed, and etched a new line on the lid with an engraving pen. 2025. Rebuild. As the letters glowed, the image of the old steel bridge appeared in my mind. It hadn't failed because the metal was weak, but because people hadn't reinforced it in time. I wouldn't let that happen again. That afternoon, I called Mark Cardenas, an old friend who used to be a police officer in Austin. Mark, I need you to check something. See if there have ever been complaints about a man named Travis Beckett in finance or investments. Mark chuckled over the line. Still meticulous as ever. Give me 2 days. 2 days later, he sent a PDF file. It contained several minor complaints: investment disputes, unpaid commissions, and a brokerage contract canceled for misreporting income. Nothing criminal, but enough to show his nature. I printed it and clipped it into my ledger. That night, sitting on the porch, I watched the light from the Oak Ridge house reflecting across the lake. The glow was still warm and golden, yet in my eyes it felt cold. I thought of Mason, of Lily, and wondered, do they know that the house was bought with their grandfather's entire life? I knew the answer, not yet, but one day they would. Before bed, I wrote another line in my notebook. March 28th, signed notice of default, white envelope, 30-day period. Then I set down the pen, looked at the envelope on the table, and whispered, "Tomorrow you'll receive it, Travis. But it won't be money. It will be justice." Friday morning, Austin was overcast. I made coffee and watched the steam rise from the cup. Rich, warm, the only thing that still made this house feel alive. The clock on the wall read 7:30. At exactly 8, I would take that white envelope to Oak Ridge, not to cause a scene, but to end the silence. I grabbed my coat and glanced at the old wooden box in the garage. Inside, everything was neatly arranged. The original deed of trust, the notarized copy, and the sealed notice of default Julia had prepared. I brushed my hand over the lid, feeling the smooth, cool oak grain. I had built that box myself back in 1992, using timber from the Hillcrest Bridge project. I never imagined one day it would protect the documents defending my own family. Before leaving, I opened my notebook and reread the last line I'd written the night before. March 28th, white envelope, 30-day period. I smiled, closed it, placed it in the drawer, and drove off. The road to Oak Ridge was strangely quiet. Pines along the lake swayed gently in the wind. The air was crisp, and the water was veiled in mist. When I reached the gate, I stopped, got out, and straightened my collar. The iron gate was still locked, the red camera light glowing. I pressed the buzzer. A moment later, Travis's voice came through the intercom, curt and dry. "Who is it?" "It's me," I said evenly. "Peter Langford." Silence, then a click. The electric lock released. He stepped out wearing his usual white shirt, a coffee cup in hand, pretending to be casual. "You again? I thought we were clear." I looked at him calmly. "Yes, we are. Today I just brought you what you asked for." He raised an eyebrow, half amused, half mocking. "Oh? So you finally agreed to pay $2,000 to see your grandkids?" I said nothing, just handed him the envelope. "Here, everything you wanted is inside." He took it, surprise flickering across his face before confidence returned. "Good. Looks like you're more reasonable than I thought." He tore open the seal right there. For a few seconds he smiled. Then the smile froze. His eyes shifted from curious to stunned, then reddened with anger. "What is this?" he barked. I replied slowly, each word clear. "Notice of default. Under Texas law, you have 30 days to pay the full loan balance, $128,000 principal, 3 years of interest and legal costs. If not, this property will be lawfully foreclosed." "You're joking, right?" He flipped the pages, his hands trembling. "You can't do this. This is my house." I met his gaze, calm as the lake at dawn. "It's the house I saved, and it's still under my name. The deed of trust doesn't lie, Travis. You have 30 days. He stepped closer, his tone low and sharp. Don't you see you're destroying this family? Claire will hate you forever. I replied evenly, I'm not destroying anything. I'm correcting the foundation you built wrong. He clenched the envelope, teeth grinding. I'll sue you. I'll have this overturned. I know, I said, turning away. Julia Denton knows too. See you in court. I walked to my car. From the yard, Mason and Lily ran out. Grandpa, Mason called. Travis spun around, shouting, Get inside! The kids froze. I turned back, smiling gently. I'm just busy today, Mason. We'll go fishing soon. They nodded, their faces a mix of joy and confusion. As I closed the door, Travis stood there, face flushed, hand gripping the paper. He shouted, You'll regret this. I swear you will. I started the engine, reversing slowly. In the rearview mirror, I saw him standing in the yard, hair disheveled, coffee spilled, the document crumpled in his fist. Claire came out onto the porch, pale. He turned and yelled something at her. She didn't answer. She just stepped back inside. People reveal their true nature only when their power begins to slip. That afternoon, I met with Julia. After I told her everything, she nodded. Good. You did the right thing. Now we wait for their response. If they don't pay within 30 days, I'll file the complaint with Travis County Court. I asked, And Claire? Julia set her pen down, her voice soft but firm. You can't save them both if they don't want to be saved, but you can preserve the truth. Sometimes that's the only thing worth keeping. I nodded, finished my coffee, and stood. Before leaving, I said quietly, When they opened that envelope, I saw Travis's real face for the first time, and it was the last time I ever believed in his idea of family. Julia replied, her tone low, steady. It's all right, Peter. Justice will handle the rest. I drove home under the darkening sky. The lights across Lake Travis shimmered on the water. I sat on the porch, opened my notebook, and wrote the final line for that day. March 30th. Envelope delivered. Hostile reaction. He will strike back. Prepare to face it. I closed the book, stared into the distance, and thought, an engineer doesn't fear the storm, only not knowing it's coming. 3 days later, I received a call from Julia Denton. Her voice was calm and measured as always, but this time there was a weight to it. Peter, they've responded. Travis hired an attorney and filed a countersuit. He's claiming the money you provided was a gift, not a loan. I wasn't surprised. I expected that, Julia continued. They also submitted a statement from Claire saying you helped voluntarily and never requested repayment. The signature is hers. I froze for a few seconds. Claire signed it? Yes, Julia said softly. But that doesn't change the facts. We have the notarized contract, the bank records, and your tax filings showing the payment as a secured loan. There's nothing to fear. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling. It's just... She signed it. Julia was quiet for a moment. I know, Peter. But sometimes people sign not because they believe, but because they're afraid. Her words silenced me. That afternoon, I drove to Lake Travis. The water was deep blue, sunlight flickering on the surface like floating coins. I sat on the dock, remembering the last time Mason sat beside me asking, Grandpa, why do I miss the fish even when they bite? I told him. Because you rush. Fish are clever. They wait for you to lose patience. Now I understand. In life, the fool isn't the fish. It's the man who waits too long to pull the line. That night, Julia emailed me. Preliminary hearing, Travis County Court, April 20th. I printed the notice and marked it in red. 3 weeks to prepare. 3 weeks to prove I wasn't the fool who gave away his entire life. April 20th came faster than I thought. The courtroom was small, lit with soft yellow light. Julia sat beside me, composed, razor sharp. Across from us, Travis wore a gray suit, face clean-shaven, trying to look calm. Claire sat behind him, eyes lowered. When the judge entered, everyone rose. I heard shoes tapping on the floor, chairs sliding softly. Julia opened the file and whispered, You don't need to speak. I'll handle the rest. The opposing lawyer spoke first, smooth and rehearsed like a reflection of Travis. Your Honor, my client, Mr. Travis Beckett, received financial help from his father-in-law, Mr. Peter Langford, in a spirit of family support. There was no loan agreement, only voluntary assistance. After 3 years, Mr. Langford unexpectedly sought foreclosure, turning a family matter into a civil dispute. Julia smiled faintly and stood. Your Honor, we have the original deed of trust, notarized March 5th, 2022, signed by both parties with the seal of the Travis County office. Additionally, the bank records confirm the full transfer of $128,000 from Mr. Langford's account to the defendant's account, marked Loan Mortgage Relief. Each payment is recorded in his personal accounting ledger. She placed each document before the judge. The papers made a soft rustling sound like sand slipping through fingers. Travis's attorney interjected, but my client and his wife understood it as a gift. Julia lifted her gaze. Understanding is one thing. Law is another. When a document is notarized, personal interpretation cannot override legal text. Furthermore, my client possesses text messages from Mr. Beckett acknowledging repayment promises during the first 3 months of 2021 before the payments stopped. That is clear evidence of debt acknowledgement. The judge flipped through the files, looking over his glasses. His voice was low and steady. Both parties were present at the 2022 signing. Julia replied, Yes, Your Honor. Here's the notarization record and a photo taken in the office. She handed over the photograph. In it, I was shaking Travis's hand. Julia behind the printer, Claire smiling. The judge examined it for a long moment before nodding. The court finds sufficient grounds to determine this was a secured loan. Mr. Beckett failed to meet repayment obligations over 3 years. Under Texas law, the lien remains valid. Foreclosure rights are granted. The defendants have until June 30th to vacate the property. Travis shot to his feet, shouting, You can't do this. That's my house. The judge struck the gavel. Order in the court. Julia placed a steady hand on my shoulder. I took a slow breath and looked at Claire. She raised her head, eyes trembling. I simply nodded. As we left the courtroom, Travis turned and hissed, You won, but you'll never see your daughter or your grandkids again. I met his glare and said quietly, I didn't win. The bridge broke, and I'm not letting anyone cross the wreckage anymore. That night, I sat on the porch, listening to rain tapping on the tin roof. Julia called. Congratulations, Peter. It's over. The court signed the ruling. I said thank you. But justice doesn't celebrate, Julia. It just does its job. I watched Lake Travis shimmer under the rain, circles spreading and fading, and murmured, The foundation's done. Now comes the family. I opened my notebook and wrote, April 20th, preliminary judgment. Case 1, move-out deadline June 30th. Claire silent. Travis threatens to cut contact. Beneath it, I drew a single red line. Phase 2, reclaim the right to be a grandfather. For 2 weeks after the hearing, I heard nothing from Claire. No texts, no calls, not even a word through someone else. The Oak Ridge house had become an island. No one went in, no one came out. Julia said, They're waiting for a miracle or a loophole. But miracles don't visit debtors, Peter. I only nodded. At night, I sat on the porch, listening to rain and thinking of the children. I kept seeing Mason's small hand pressed against the window that day, his eyes clear yet silent. Some memories don't need sound. Their silence says enough. On Tuesday morning, the phone rang. Claire's name appeared on the screen. My heart tightened. I answered. Her voice trembled. Dad, what are we supposed to do now? I was quiet, hearing only the wind on her end. Then I said slowly, clearly, You must do what's right, Claire. Not for me, for yourself and for your children. She choked. Travis says you're trying to take everything from us, that you want us to end up with nothing. I shook my head, though she couldn't see it. If I wanted to take, I wouldn't have waited 3 years. I only want the truth returned. Silence followed. Then she whispered, "He said if I talk to you again, he'll leave and take the kids." Her voice cracked. "Dad, I'm scared." I clenched my teeth. Being scared is natural, but remember, the one who threatens to leave never really wants to stay. You can't keep someone who only knows how to demand. Claire said nothing. I heard her breathing, uneven, then the call ended. That afternoon, Julia called. "Peter, the opposing attorney filed a temporary appeal. They're trying to buy time. I've already responded, but it will delay enforcement." "How long?" I asked. 30 days at most. But I think they're unraveling. I heard Travis has started withdrawing money from his business accounts. I said nothing. Julia added, "I know you worry about your daughter, but this is the stage where you can't soften. If you want to keep justice, don't let emotion interfere." I replied quietly, "I lost emotion the moment I saw my daughter's signature." That night, I opened my notebook. Beneath the line, Phase 2, "Reclaim the right to be a grandfather," I wrote, "May 3rd, Claire called, afraid, coerced. Travis appealed." I stopped writing, looking outside. The Texas night sky had no stars, only thick black clouds, heavy as concrete. On May 10th, Julia called again. The court rejected the appeal. The original judgment stands. Move-out deadline unchanged, June 30th. She paused, her tone lower. "They're desperate, Peter. Be ready for one last strike." "What kind?" I asked. Julia sighed. "The kind losers choose, emotion, blame, or lies." And she was right. It came sooner than expected. 3 days later, their neighbor, Gwen, called me. "Mr. Langford, I'm not sure if I should say this, but yesterday I overheard Travis telling a delivery man that you stole the house out of jealousy, that you wanted to break up their family." I smiled faintly, neither angry nor sad. "Thank you, Gwen. They're trying to save themselves by inventing reasons to feel righteous. Debtors always believe they owe because they were forced, not because they were wrong." I hung up and looked at the legal documents spread on my desk. Each page was a piece of truth that needed no defense. 3 days later, I met Mark Cardenas at a cafe downtown. He sat down and spoke quietly. "I ran into someone from Regions Bank. Travis applied for a new loan and tried to use the Oak Ridge house as collateral. The system rejected it. Lien still active. He lost it in the branch, yelling." I nodded. "A man about to lose his footing thrashes hardest before he falls." Mark asked, "Do you think Claire will come around?" I looked out the window where sunlight glinted off car windows. "She will, but not yet. People in darkness can't see the light, Mark. Their eyes have to adjust first." That night, I received a nameless text. "You're not my father anymore. Forget us." I didn't need to guess who sent it. I sat still, rereading it several times. I didn't feel pain, only emptiness. I closed the phone and sighed. The bridge has lost another beam, but I still have to cross. I opened my notebook and wrote, "May 14th, received message from Claire. No blame. Bridge cracked, foundation steady." The next morning, Julia emailed, "The court has set the enforcement date if they don't vacate by June 30th. The sheriff's office will handle it. Everything is in order." I read it, then closed the laptop. Outside, the sun rose, spilling gold light across Lake Travis. I sipped my coffee, my heartbeat slow and steady. It felt like the calm before a storm. Not fear, just focus. I knew this stage was no longer about money or the house. It was the final test of a father. Whether he could defend justice, even if it meant walking through loneliness to do it. On June 29th, I received an email from Julia. "The eviction order has been approved. Tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock, Travis County deputies will be at Oak Ridge to enforce it." I read that line over and over, not because I regretted anything, but because I knew it would close a long chapter, the one I once called family. That night, it rained. Texas rain fell heavy and relentlessly, as if the sky itself wanted to wash away the last boundary between right and wrong. I sat on the porch listening to it hammer the tin roof, and for the first time in months, I allowed myself to remember where it all began. The day I saved that house. The afternoon I saw Claire laughing in sunlight. The moment I believed kindness alone could hold everything together. I had been wrong. Kindness doesn't save those who mistake it for weakness. The next morning I woke before dawn. No alarm needed. I brewed coffee, put on my old jacket, and drove to Oak Ridge. The sky was silver gray, mist clinging to the pines. 2 patrol cars were already parked at the gate. One officer approached, voice firm but courteous. "Mr. Langford, we have the order. Everything will proceed by the book." I nodded, handing him the envelope Julia had prepared. Copies of the judgment, the property list, and proof of ownership. The gate was locked, curtains drawn tight inside. At 8:15, Travis appeared on the porch. He looked gaunt, hair disheveled, but his eyes still carried that familiar arrogance. "You're making a mistake," he shouted, pointing at me. "This is my house. I live here. I pay taxes." The lead deputy kept his tone even. "Mr. Beckett, records show you failed to comply with the court order and refused to vacate. Please cooperate." Travis laughed, a harsh, broken sound. "Justice? This is just his trick?" He jabbed a finger toward me. "He's jealous of me. He wants to destroy my family." I said nothing. There was no need. Every excuse had lost its weight the moment he turned affection into a weapon. Claire stepped out, pale, holding Lily. Mason clung to her dress, eyes wide. "Mom, what's happening?" The question cut deep. Claire didn't look at me. She only whispered, "Go inside, Mason." The deputy handed her papers. "Mrs. Beckett, the court requires you to vacate the premises today. You may take personal belongings." Travis tried to protest, but when 2 officers opened the garage, he roared, "Don't touch my stuff," and stormed inside. 5 minutes later came the sound of things breaking. I moved forward, but the deputy stopped me. "Let them vent, Mr. Langford. It always happens." I stayed still, watching rain drip through the trees. Claire emerged with a small suitcase, shoulders shaking. She looked at me, voice hoarse. "Dad?" "I don't know what to say." I shook my head. "You don't have to say anything. Just live right, and everything will find its place again." She nodded, tears mixing with rain. Lily ran to me, hugging my leg. "Grandpa, I don't understand, but I miss you." I bent down, holding her tiny, warm hands. "You will understand someday, Lily. I'll always be here." A moment later, Travis was led out carrying bags, his face flushed red. "You won," he spat, "but you lost everything. No one from this house will ever come back to you." I looked at him calmly. What I lost wasn't them. It was the illusion of who they were. That's enough. He turned away, tossed his suitcase into the car, and drove off into the pouring rain. When the police left, only Claire, the children, and I remained. She stood under the porch, staring at the empty house, her eyes hollow. "Dad, I thought he just needed time, that things would get better." I said, "Time only heals those who want to heal, Claire. For the proud, it only weakens them before they fall." She looked up, tears streaming. "I'm sorry, Dad." I said nothing, only opened my arms. As she leaned in, I felt the bridge being rebuilt. Not whole, but enough to cross. That afternoon, Julia arrived. She signed the final papers, took photographs, and handed me a new file. "The Oak Ridge property is yours now, Peter. It's done." I nodded, looking across the wet lawn. Travis's footprints still marked the ground, fading as the rain washed them away. Julia said quietly, "Justice is often like this. Damp, quiet, never grand." I smiled. Justice doesn't need to be loud. It just needs to be finished. That night I returned to my lakeside home. The pale moonlight shimmered on the water. I sat down, opened my notebook, and wrote, "June 30th. Order executed. They left. Claire apologized. Lily hugged me. Mason silent. Rain." Below it, I added one final line. "No one wins. Only the truth remains." I closed the book, leaned back in my chair, and stared at the ceiling. The rain had stopped, leaving only the scent of wet earth and wood. I closed my eyes, thinking of tomorrow, the first day in 3 years when I would no longer be anyone's burden, but a man who had reclaimed what was his. A week after Oak Ridge was returned, I went back there for the first time, walking into a place that had once been yours, then stolen, then reclaimed. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like recovering a forgotten part of your body. The house was quiet, carrying the faint scent of damp wood and old paint. Morning light streamed through the window, shining on the wall where the family photo I'd given Claire on her wedding day used to hang. Now there was only a pale outline where the frame had been. I walked slowly down the hallway, my hand brushing the walls I'd once painted myself. Every crack, every patch of peeling paint told a story. Julia arrived 10 minutes later, a thick folder neatly tucked under her arm. "I just came from the county office," she said. "The title transfer is complete. You're now the sole owner." I nodded softly. "Good. I won't keep it long, Julia. I just needed to see it back where it belongs." She glanced around, her eyes faintly sad. "Are you planning to sell?" "No," I said. "I'll rent it. The money will fund a scholarship for Mason and Lily when they're old enough. I don't want them growing up carrying guilt for their parents' mistakes." Julia looked at me for a long time before saying, "You're different from most of my clients, Peter. They usually want revenge. You just want to repair what cracked." I smiled. "I'm an engineer, Julia. To fix is instinct. To destroy is failure." When Julia left, I stayed behind. I opened the windows, letting the wind bring in the scent of grass and lake water. In the kitchen, I found a folded note left on the counter, Claire's handwriting. "Dad, I knew you'd come back. I don't know what to say except thank you. I'm starting over, smaller, but safer. Mason misses you, Lily too. I'll tell them everything, but not in a way that makes them hate their parents. I'll just help them understand who built the roof above their heads." I folded the note and slipped it into my pocket. It didn't feel like pain anymore. Something closer to peace. That afternoon, Mark Cardenas dropped by with 2 beers. "You did it," he said. "Not many people get this far and still keep their heads straight." I laughed softly, opening one. "I didn't win, Mark. I just cleaned up the debris." He looked toward the lake and nodded. "Debris from others, but still your scars." His words made me silent. I thought of the years I'd let pass, the times I'd chosen silence over confrontation. Maybe if I'd been firmer then, the bridge wouldn't have broken, but people only understand the structure of collapse after standing in its ruins. That evening, I drove around Austin. From a hilltop, I saw the lights of the new housing project, the one Travis had bragged about investing in. It was now stalled, a foreclosure-pending sign hanging crooked on the gate. I stopped the car and stared for a long while. Justice may come late, but it always arrives. I felt no joy, no triumph, only calm. I knew he would leave the state soon, somewhere far away where no one spoke his name again. As for Claire, I believed she would rebuild, because there was still a goodness in her that he could never touch. When I returned home that night, the moon shimmered over Lake Travis, the water flat as glass. I sat down, opened my notebook, and wrote, July 7th, paperwork completed. Retained Oak Ridge House. Claire left a letter. Mason and Lily are safe. Travis is gone. Then I paused, staring at the page for a long while. For the first time in months, I felt no need to write anything more. I poured a glass of wine and looked at my reflection in the window. The man staring back was no longer a victim. He was proof that justice needs no weapon. Only patience. I whispered to myself, an engineer doesn't just build bridges of steel. He builds justice from faith. Then I closed the notebook, turned off the light, and let the house rest in silence. If you've listened this far, perhaps you understand. This isn't just a story about a house or numbers in a bank ledger. It's about the final boundary of a father. When kindness is mistaken for weakness, when family becomes a weapon, and when justice must rise inside the very home that once held love. I didn't seek revenge, I reclaimed the truth. Because sometimes justice doesn't need a gavel or a shout. It only needs one person willing to stand and say, "Enough." If this story touched you, leave a comment. Tell me which city you're watching from and what you think justice looks like. Don't forget to subscribe, turn on notifications, and share this video with someone who needs to remember kindness isn't meant to be exploited. It's meant to protect, once we're strong enough not to fear losing anything. Because wherever there is justice, there is light.